If you joined us tonight for your very first Fireside chat, the structure of these really comes from FDR, who as president in the 1930s, 1940s, he spoke to a nation much like a father would to his own family around a fireplace there in the home. And his whole goal was to address the nation and to bring a calm and an encouragement to them during a time that the United States was really struggling. And we're using Psalm 23 to accomplish that same intent, that same goal. Is my hope and prayer on these has been just to encourage your heart. And I don't know about you, the great news is that the Word of God always accomplishes its purpose. And so I trust that God will use His Word here out of Psalm 23 to bring both a calm and an encouragement. If I can, just to start us off, let me read this passage. And part of my reasoning behind reading the passage, the whole psalm at the beginning and the end, is at some point this starts to go to our memory, and we memorize this psalm if we hear it enough. So King David writes, here's what he says. He says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters, and He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for You are with me. Your rod and Your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." I've been told that the Chinese symbol for the word crisis is made up of two independent symbols. The first one carries the meaning of grave danger. The second one carries the meaning of great opportunity. And when you think about it, we're living in such a time where that really captures what's going on here. Great opportunity, and also the reality of a very serious, grave danger that is around us. And I love Psalm 23, this kingly psalm, because David, he opens up this psalm and basically explains that there's a mixture of both in life as you follow the shepherd. There is grave danger, but there's also great opportunity. Yeah, you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, but you don't die there. And so he gives this great hope and confidence, not in the sheep and not in him, but in the shepherd. That's why he starts in verse 1 with the phrase, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And if you remember, we summarized that with just the statement, frankly, I am safe. I am safe. And then last week, we looked at the verse 2, the beginning part of it, and it says, He makes me lie down in green pastures. And we came to embrace the concept that sometimes the Good Shepherd and God pauses our life, and He just kind of stops us in our tracks and makes us lie down. Well, tonight I want to look at one concept, but it comes out of both verse 2 and verse 3, the same thinking. At the end of verse 2 and the end of verse 3, listen to what David says. He says, He leads me, who's He? That's the great shepherd. He leads me beside still waters. If you look at the end of verse 3, it says, He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. If I gave you one sentence as a takeaway, it would simply be this, that God is taking me somewhere. God is taking you somewhere during COVID-19. And I just want to say to you as fellow sheep, let me just tell you something. Our shepherd is up to something. And our shepherd is taking us somewhere. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you're already on a path and you're already behind the shepherd, Jesus. And getting behind the shepherd and staying on this path in the Christian life, but particularly at times of grave danger and great opportunity, is so crucial that we stay behind the shepherd and we stay on the path. During times like this, shooting ahead or staying behind or straying off the path, that can lead us into a world of hurt. And so tonight, as we look at this, I want you to understand that the whole goal in the Christian life is to keep our eyes on Jesus and to follow the Good Shepherd. You see, when we get off the path in the Christian life is when we begin to panic. When you get off the path, that is the moment in time that you begin to panic. If you would, just think of an old time that you have maybe been hiking, you've been following a trail, and all of a sudden you got off the path, you got off the trail, and it actually lasted for a period of time, and the farther you went, the more lost you became. That's what David's talking about here, is that staying on the path is so important during times like this. Staying on the path requires something from you and from me. And that's simply this: it requires faith. Faith is so important because the moment we begin to doubt God, we begin to doubt the Good Shepherd, is the moment we start to stray off the path or stay behind because we're starting to lose trust in the shepherd. I love Martin Lloyd-Jones, the doctor, as they used to call him. He said this, that faith is a refusal to panic. Did you hear that? Faith is a refusal to panic. And so as we follow the shepherd, notice what verse 2 says. He leads me beside still waters. Notice verse 3. He leads me in paths. Sheep require great and consistent and constant care. Sheep must be kept on the move at all times. And that's why it's imperative that the shepherd has to lead the sheep. This is so critical. The idea of leading carries this idea of guiding, this intimate care, this idea that he gives us great direction. And don't you love that phrase from a shepherd standpoint, that he leads us? You know, the Good Shepherd doesn't drive us. We're not cattle, and he's not a rancher. No, this is much more personal, much more intimate, much more relational. That of a shepherd, that he leads us. He doesn't drive cattle and push us down the path. I remember as a kid growing up and watching reruns. I watched the reruns. I didn't watch the original because I'm not that old. But there was a show, it was called Rawhide. And every time it came on, it always came on with the same song to it. It was rolling, 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 keep moving, moving, moving. Though they're disapproving, keep them doggies moving. Rawhide. Let's all stand and sing 6 choruses. That's not what the Good Shepherd does. He doesn't just drive cattle like Rawhide. No, our shepherd, he leads us. And remember this, as I said at the very beginning, he doesn't just lead us, but he's taking us somewhere. There's a purpose in the path. There really is a purpose in the path. And therefore, it's important to make sure we let him lead us and we don't try to get ahead of him and we don't lag behind him. And the reality is, in the midst of crisis like this, we realize very quickly we have very little control in life. The idea that we control anything is a crock. There's no rhyme or reason to it. We don't control anything. And so the reality is we need someone to follow. And that's why Jesus says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. I am the first and the last. Isn't that comforting to know that he's not just the last? Like, I don't know where we're going, but I'm with you. Or he doesn't say, hey, I'm just the first. I'm here for a while, but I'll probably drop back. No, he leads us. And therefore, what's so cool about our good shepherd, our great shepherd, is he's at the beginning and the end of the path and everything in between. In fact, David wrote another psalm about this, and let me just share it with you. In Psalm 139, just the very first 5 verses, listen to what David says. He says, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path, he says, and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. Now listen to verse 5. He says, and you hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. I want you to know something, that Jesus was at the beginning of the path of COVID-19, and Jesus is already at the end of the curve. Our greatest fear in life and of the future events, whether it be that CT scan, that MRI, that conversation that we have to have with a friend or family member, things that create panic in our life, what's so cool about the Great Shepherd is he's already there. I mean, like he's literally already there in that conversation, at that appointment. He's already there. He's already laid out a path, a way through it. This is probably one of the most comforting things to me in the midst of crisis that has come upon my life, is to know that the thing I'm fearing in the future, Jesus has already been there and has already scoped out the lay of the land. And notice this, he's leading us beside still waters, the verse says. You know, like I said at the beginning, God is taking us somewhere. And where's he taking us? He's already kind of scoped out the path, and he's already found the places where we can find some fresh, life-giving water. That's what I love about Jesus. Jesus never guesses at anything. He only knows. And he knows where those places of refreshment at the right time for us. I've always said that, Jesus, he never shows up early, and he never shows up late. He's a just-in-time shepherd. And what's interesting, that the shepherd takes the sheep by these still waters, part of that is because the sheep can only drink from still water. They're too frightened of moving water. They back away from it. They can't get a drink out of a river. It has to be a still water. Kind of like we would say we can't get a drink out of a fire hydrant. And the tragedy is, if the sheep don't follow the shepherd to the still water, then what happens, they get thirsty and they'll start looking for water, and they will drink from polluted water out of potholes. The polluted water will develop parasites and liver diseases in them. And so this evening, let me ask you something. Are you letting the Good Shepherd take you to the places of fresh, clean, still water? It's very easy when we get thrown off our game and out of routines and rhythm that we begin to turn to things that we think will feed us or bring comfort to us, kind of like comfort food. And the problem is, it can be very polluted, the things that we let into our life during the times of crisis. God was speaking through Jeremiah to his people, the Israelites, and he was telling them straight up that, man, I'm concerned for you. And in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13, listen to what the Lord says. He says, for my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters. That's the first thing they've done. And then they have hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. What have they done? They've turned away from the things of the Lord. They have turned away from the living water, and they've turned to polluted things. Let me just ask you as a shepherd, what are the things that you are turning to during this time of grave danger and great opportunity? That's why our daily disciplines, even in the midst of crisis, is so important. It's so crucial that we commit ourselves to the daily disciplines so that we drink and we live off clean water. Okay, I get it, Todd. So what path am I on, and really what is its purpose? Because we're into week 4 or whatever it is, and I'm starting to lose sight of really what's going on here. Well, the great news is David answers it in verse 3. He says, He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. This idea of leading, he sets me on a path. He sets me on a particular way. He sets me in a particular direction, if you will. You ask, well, what is it? What is this path that I'm on? Well, he tells us right there. It's a path that produces righteousness in us. You ask, where is God taking me? He's taking me to a greater understanding of His righteousness. Do you remember in 2015 the big brouhaha of the political scene of that bridge to nowhere in Alaska? We're not on our path to nowhere. We're on the path to somewhere. And what is that somewhere? It's the righteousness of God. Let me just affirm to some of you out there who have kind of been knocked off your game, and you're out of rhythm, you're out of routine, you feel a little bit of, you don't have a lot of purpose. Let me just tell you something. You are on the right path as long as you're behind the shepherd, and the path that you are on is a place that God is taking you to a greater and a deeper understanding, appreciation of, and a greater example of righteousness. Hear me out. You may question the path you're on right now, but I just want you to understand something. The shepherd is taking you somewhere. And I'll be the first to admit that, when I get out of my routine, I get out of a rhythm in my life, it's very easy to feel lost, This idea of, man, what's going on? I've even had this feeling. I was talking with Pastor Mark this morning of, like in the middle of the day, like, what's my purpose? Because things are so different right now. You start to think, wait a minute, I'm on this path, but maybe I missed a sign earlier and I was supposed to go left and I went right. I'm going the wrong way maybe. Have you ever gone the wrong way on a one-way street? Yeah, me neither. I've just read about it. And what I've read is that if you're going the wrong way in a one-way street, all of a sudden you just feel like, wait a minute, this is so backwards. Why is that truck coming at me? And where's this other lane I'm looking for? Because you have been shaken up. And you may be sitting there even thinking, man, I think if I was on this path, that would be better. Or maybe you talk to a friend who's just killing it during this COVID-19. They're in a rhythm. They're loving Jesus, their family. I mean, they are like, they're getting 5 stars every aspect of their life. And you're like, man, I think I should be on their path. Well, understand this, that you're on your path. And even remember Proverbs 16:25 that says there is a way, there is a path that seems right to a man. Oh, that path. I want to be on that path. That path looks like a lot more fun, but that path, that way, in its end, it leads to death. And so you have to understand something. The path that you're on, the path that I'm on during this time, Yeah, it's not an easy path. An easy path, let me just say it this way, never provides the greatest view. I mean, the best view comes from a very long path with a steep incline. It gets very narrow towards the top because very few people actually make it there. I think Jesus was the one who said, narrow is the path, the way. So yeah, it's difficult. But you have to understand something, that God is doing something in you, creating a sense of righteousness as you trust and exhibit faith in the shepherd that's leading you. It's challenging. I always think of Matthew chapter 4, verse 1, when Matthew records that Jesus was then led up. Jesus was put on a path by the Spirit of God so that he might go into the wilderness and be tempted. That doesn't sound like a great path. But that was the path that the Spirit of God put Jesus on. Now, in our humanity, it's very easy to step back and say, well, wait a minute, I have a better path. I'm going to do it my way. Not only do I have a better path, I have a better way to do this COVID-19 thing. One of my favorite preachers who's been with Jesus for a number of years now, he still preaches more than I do every day, is J. Vernon McGee. And he has that kind of raspy voice. If you ever heard J. Vernon McGee, he has a great saying. When we begin to think of, hey, I have a better path, I have a better idea, I have a better plan, I have a better way, J. Vernon McGee says this with his raspy voice: this is God's universe. He does things his way. You may have a better way, but you do not have a universe. that is rich. And so if you're like me, after a few weeks into this, you're starting to think, I want a different pathway. I want to go a different way. We have to trust the shepherd. We've got to stay behind him. We've got to stay on this path. Why do I have to stay on this path? Because the shepherd is taking me somewhere. There is a purpose in my path. What is it? He says right there at the end of verse 3, this path is basically for his name's sake. We're back to that whole point again on the glory of God. What's the whole purpose of this crisis? I'll tell you, the purpose is for God to receive more glory from it. The path with the most glory is the path the shepherd will always put you on. He's doing a great work in the midst of this. He's producing righteousness in our lives. I don't know, you probably don't know this. Well, of course you don't know this, but last night, 4 of our Elevate students gave their life to Christ. And I hope you're dancing in the living room right now. They were just on a Zoom call with their small group, and 4 of them actually gave their life to the shepherd and said, I want to be on your path. Why is this happening? Because God's going to receive the greatest glory on this path. That's why it's happening. God is occupied with his glorification. He is not occupied with our gratification. He's not trying to make us comfortable. It is a tough path. This road that we're on is unique. It's somewhat never experienced before, but he has a purpose in it. As I close tonight, listen again with your own ears and lean into Psalm 23 and hear the voice. Remember, the voice is coming from the sheep. This is from the perspective of the sheep that David writes. He says in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they do comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell. Hear this out. I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever and ever. God is taking us somewhere. There is purpose in this path. And the great purpose is for him to receive the greatest amount of glory. Stay behind the shepherd. Stay on the path. And we'll see you next Thursday night.